Our guest today is Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He is the 16th Secretary of HUD and was sworn in just over 7 months ago. Our guest today oversees 8,000 employees and has a $46 billion budget. Before joining HUD, he served as mayor of the city of San Antonio. Our guest today earned his bachelor's degree from Stanford University and his law degree from Harvard Law School. He and his wife, Erica, have a daughter, Karina, and a son, Christian. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Julian Castro. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it is always a pleasure to be here in balmy Chicago, Illinois. At least that's what I was told, because it was in the 40s last night. Thank you very much, Jay, for that kind introduction and for all the great work I know that you're doing as president. I also want to thank your chair, Paul Green, and the entire Board of Governors for their outstanding leadership. And I want to thank Congresswoman Kelly and all of our elected officials. We appreciate the service that you give. And finally, let me thank all of you, Chicago civic leaders, for your very generous welcome today. I was a bit worried about the reception that I'd get after what the Spurs did to the Bulls last night. But y'all have been very gracious. Actually, I'm going easy on you. Let me give you a little quick joke that I used to tell in Houston. I used to say, whenever I was in Houston, that San Antonio and Houston are so much alike. They're both big cities in Texas. They're both more humid than any person should have to deal with. And they both wish that they had a big league football team. I deeply appreciate, yeah, folks just trying to get that one. I deeply appreciate your hospitality and, more importantly, your tremendous contributions across this beautiful city, from Rogers Park to Riverdale. In shaping a stronger Chicago, you're shaping a stronger nation. And I'm pleased to be here today to talk about what we can do to shape a stronger future for all Americans. We gather today at an important moment. A few years ago, something unprecedented happened in world history. It was announced that for the first time ever, more people lived in urban communities than in non-urban ones. In this 21st century, we're living in a century of cities, a time when human beings around the world are urbanizing at a breathtaking pace. In China, in India, throughout Africa, in Latin America. And it's also occurring here in the United States. The Census Bureau projects that by 2050, our nation's population will grow by 80 million people, 60 million of whom are likely to live in urban areas. Why throughout history? And why now are people choosing cities? Because cities are rich with possibility, places where ideas, imagination, and innovation are brought to life. They foster incredible human connections, creativity, and culture. And this great city is an excellent example of that promise, and it has been for a very long time. The 1909 Plan for Chicago represented a bold new vision for urban life. It recognized the benefits of green space and an expanded business district. It valued strong commercial and civic connections between neighborhoods. As the plan's architect, Daniel Burnham, once said, this, quote, city is without bounds or limits. Time and again, Chicago has proven this to be true, with cutting-edge policy and development taking place from the streetscape to the skyline. Now we've got to take this Chicago approach the Chicago attitude, if you will, and apply it to the work that lies ahead for our entire nation. We must ensure that America's cities in this 21st century are centers of opportunity, places where every American can achieve without bounds or limits. And that's where HUD comes in. It's why we came to life 50 years ago. Back in 1965, in a message to Congress pushing for the creation of our department, President Johnson spoke of the need to protect core values in a modernizing world. He said that the American city should be a place where we satisfy our needs for shelter and for work, where education expands our horizons and extends our expectations, where we feel safe, and where every person can find the satisfaction and warmth that comes from being a member of a community. This is the value of our work. Today we call ourselves the Department of Opportunity because of the important part that we've played and continue to play in helping to build up strong cities. We appreciate the role that cities have in sparking growth for entire regions, including tribal and suburban communities. And we continue to do everything we can to help cities prosper. And that requires partnership with local leaders like y'all. The urban writer and activist Jane Jacobs was right when she said that cities can provide something for everybody only when they're created by everybody. Government, business, philanthropic, and community leaders all have a role to play and must come together and build together in order to maximize the potential of our urban places. I speak from firsthand experience. As mayor of San Antonio, I led SA 2020, an effort that we launched in the fall of 2010 to dream, plan, and act to make San Antonio a greater city in the decade to follow. And folks from the business community, our nonprofits, our civic leaders from throughout the community came together over 6 months to put together a blueprint for the future. And a decent amount of the progress that we saw in the years to follow came from that work. That approach is also what we're doing at HUD. We know that progress is built on collaboration, and we're working with a wide range of partners to help shape healthy 21st century communities. All of this starts with helping folks secure a quality, affordable place to call home. I don't have to tell any of you about the important role that housing plays for folks across the nation. It's where we start and end our days. It's where our children grow up and where families form their memories. Quite simply, it's the center of our lives and the foundation of our futures. But right now, our nation is in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, not just in big urban centers, but in small ones as well. 7.7 million low-income households who aren't receiving any government assistance right now pay more than half of their income on rent. They live in substandard housing or both, according to HUD's latest worst-case housing needs analysis. That's roughly equal to the number of people living in Chicago, LA, and Dallas combined. We're talking about folks who are spending so much of their precious dollars just to keep a roof over their head that they can't invest in their children's education or begin to build up savings. So we're looking for creative solutions to meet these challenges. One of these solutions is something called our Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD, initiative. It's designed to meet the needs of our nation's crumbling public housing. You see, there's currently a backlog of $26 billion in repair needs. And the nation is losing 10,000 units of public housing to disrepair each and every year. And the cold hard truth is that federal dollars are scarce and won't be able to fully address these issues anytime soon. So we launched RAD in 2012 to help housing authorities and owners of assisted housing convert to long-term Section 8 contracts. This allows them to better leverage private debt and equity to improve their properties. RAD is cost neutral for the federal government and is making a big difference in a number of cities, like Elgin, Illinois. Last month, there was a groundbreaking ceremony to celebrate the renovation of Central Park Tower, an 11-story building for seniors that was built in 1969 but was in need of significant upgrades. RAD attracted $33 million to modernize these units and develop new amenities like a computer lab and access to medical services. And residents have told us that this will make their lives easier, providing the peace of mind that every older American ought to have. And we're making this kind of impact from coast to coast in places like Lexington, North Carolina, where they saw 58 years worth of investment in public housing in just 22 months. And we want to be able to do even more. The affordable housing crisis is growing, and RAD is part of the solution, and we're going to keep pushing to meet the evolving affordable housing needs in this century of cities. Of course, we also know that housing alone isn't enough. A family needs to be able to access opportunity once they leave their front door. They need to be connected to quality schools, good jobs, and good transit options. That's why we're working with local leaders to address both obsolete housing units and the communities that they're located in. Our Choice Neighborhoods initiative is doing that in areas of concentrated poverty by emphasizing a big picture approach to redevelopment. In addition to transforming units with a one-for-one replacement approach, it's also strengthening the surrounding assets with private sector participation and with local leaders in the driver's seat. Over a 4-year period, HUD's $350 million leveraged more than $2.6 billion of additional investment. This is generating new optimism and opportunity across the nation, from Seattle to New Orleans to right here in Chicago. We've joined with Preservation of Affordable Housing, the University of Chicago, the city, and a wide range of other partners to revitalize the Woodlawn neighborhood. We're renovating more than 500 units at Grove Park Plaza and creating an additional 500 more market-rate rental and home ownership units in the neighborhood as well. The university is working with the Chicago Public Schools to create an educational environment where children can truly succeed. We're also linking residents with the job training, literacy, health, and other services that they need to fully prosper. Thus far, the community has leveraged our $30 million grant to attract nearly $380 million of additional investment. And we want to help more communities make that transition from poverty to prosperity. President Obama has requested $250 million for this initiative in his latest budget, an increase of $170 million from 2015. This big picture approach is working at the neighborhood level and at the regional level too. Just a few years ago, in 2009, HUD was proud to join with the Department of Transportation and the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, to launch what they called the Partnership for Sustainable Communities, to increase collaboration within metropolitan areas, to break down those silos that often prevent us from getting the biggest bang for the buck and being as effective as possible. Even a world-class city like Chicago doesn't operate in a vacuum. Its success is enriched through interdependent relationships with surrounding cities and counties, which together create a globally competitive region. 5 years ago, we awarded a $4.25 million grant to the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to help Chicagoland communities advance their shared vision for the future. This vision unites this region's 284 municipalities and 7 counties to build on their respective strengths. This means investments in large projects like $20 million in Tiger funds to make the 95th Street Transit Terminal safer and more pedestrian friendly. It means smaller projects that are making a big difference for families, like a community garden in Fairmont. It means folks representing a diversity of interests working together for the common community good. Very simply, it means opportunity. And we won't stop there. In this century of cities, it's not enough to just build like we've done in the past. We've got to build with emerging challenges like climate change in mind. Now let me just say that the science is very clear and very compelling. Climate change is real, and it poses a mounting threat to local communities. In fact, 2014 was the hottest year on record, and 14 of 15 of the hottest years ever recorded by man have occurred in this 21st century. I was in New York last October to mark the second anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, and I saw up close what this means on the ground. The water in that area has risen a foot since 1900. Cities exposed to these kinds of threats must take these facts into account when planning for the future. Fortunately, your city, the great city of Chicago, has been a national leader in resilience, and we want other communities to follow your example. That's why HUD has launched a national disaster resilience competition. We're devoting $1 billion to help communities affected by a recent disaster, including Chicago, build back stronger than before. We're also encouraging the use of green infrastructure like wetlands, street trees, and other natural assets. They achieve a double bottom line, enhancing the beauty and recreational space of our cities while reducing the impact of stormwater during big storms. So today, HUD is releasing a green infrastructure report that details the most important lessons that have been learned by 30 of our community partners, including here in Chicago. We're confident that it will empower other local leaders with new information to deal with flooding, to spark economic revitalization, and make their communities more vibrant and more livable, and ultimately more competitive in this 21st century global economy. Going green is good for both the health and the wealth of families. And we look forward to working with all stakeholders to strengthen communities today, tomorrow, and far into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, all of this work is ultimately about one thing: people. In this century of cities, the success of our efforts shouldn't be judged by the height of our buildings or by the square footage or grand blueprints. It ought to be judged by the way folks are able to achieve their dreams because of our work. This requires giving every American access to affordable housing and connecting this housing to great schools, good jobs, and good transit options. It requires working in partnership at that neighborhood level and the city level and regionally to meet those common goals for the community. And it requires tackling those new challenges like climate change with forward-looking, direct action. By taking these steps, we can secure those very basic and timeless goals that Lyndon Johnson talked about when he created HUD. Housing that's linked to opportunity and helping to strengthen communities. Together, I know that we can achieve these goals and make this century of cities another great chapter in the great American experience. I know that Chicago will continue to help lead the way, and I look forward to working with you to ensure that the future of America's cities, like this beautiful windy city, is without bounds or limits in this 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Church. Take your speech. It's a good speech, I'm not telling you. If you have questions, we have the young people here to pick them up. Just raise your hand. Please, no RFPs, just questions. Okay. By the way, who was the first, a quiz, who was the first head of HUD?
Robert Weaver.
Robert Weaver.
Who was also the first African-American cabinet member. Yeah.
Even the professor can learn a few things. Ed Mazer, speaking of professors, how does the, this will test your skills, how does the current composition of the U.S. Congress impact HUD's plans and your mission for the coming years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, what we have seen generally since 1981 is basically a declining commitment to things like public housing and the traditional aspects of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, including the workforce. In January of 1981, we had 16,500 employees, and today we have just over 8,000. So, you know, you always hear the government gets bigger. Well, in terms of the employees and some of the departments, that's not actually accurate. We find ourselves, again, in a challenging environment, but I'm very hopeful that we can find places of common ground. The rental assistance demonstration project that I mentioned was one of those places of common ground, and I think issues like that touch on public and private sector collaboration have tended to get a lot of support in a Republican-controlled Congress. We're looking for other ways that we can do that. Also, programs that provide significant local flexibility. A classic example of this has been Community Development Block Grants, CDBG. In the fiscal year 2016 budget, one of the proposals that we've made is to take 4 funding streams, CDBG, our home dollars, which have been integral in creating more rental and home ownership units, and then 2 programs that are part of Health and Human Services, CSBG, Community Service Block Grants, and SSBG, Social Service Block Grants, and having 10 states or local communities compete to be able to combine all of those funding streams so that they can get a bigger bang for the buck with less burdensome paperwork and regulation. It also includes a request of $300 million that would be in the Department of Health and Human Services for additional investment in that program. We think that by pursuing an approach that gives maximum local flexibility, obviously with good oversight and monitoring and accountability, and strikes at the ability of the public sector and the private sector to work together, that is the sweet spot for succeeding in this congressional term.
Jesse, take it easy here. Raymond Wall, where are you? All right, Raymond is the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund. Easy, easy. This is the City Club. If you have a problem, go see him. Here we go. How can public housing development collaborate with institutional and public pension funds to better invest in our communities now?
Well, I do think that there are ample opportunities across the United States. We see that in our work at FHA, especially the financing of multifamily buildings. I know the AFL-CIO, for instance, has been involved in that for many, many years. We also think that initiatives like RAD will provide an opportunity for those kinds of investments in the future. And so we welcome, of course, any kind of good investment to try and alleviate some of the affordable rental housing crisis that we see out there, and would love to follow up with folks on that.
Mr. Secretary, you're in Chicago, so get ready for this one, okay? I mean, we had Archbishop Supich here, and we worked him over pretty good, so here we go. Eddie, look who asked the question. Leonard Dominguez, where are you, Leonard? Raise your hand, I can't see. All right. Metropolitan Leadership Institute. I bet you've never had this question before. Quote, what year can I take my London bookie trip for the first Latino presidency? I don't make these up.
It's a great question. course, if I knew that, I'd go to Vegas right now and bet myself. Now, my hope is that, you know, we were in Selma this weekend, and a congresswoman mentioned that, and I hope that everyone had a chance to see the president's speech. I told him in the 10 seconds that I got to visit with him afterward that I thought that was the most inspiring speech that he had made as president. And one of the things that was so inspiring was the way that he captured the wonderful diversity that marks America and the way that folks have been able to come together to push our nation forward, to continually improve as a nation and to hold the same core values. And the president himself is a wonderful representation of the progress that we have made, and that it was very much in the minds of everybody there in Selma. I think that in the years to come, we're going to see that kind of progress continue to be made. Soon with the first woman president who's elected, and then after that, I think, you know, that you'll see people from different backgrounds have the opportunity, every background, as it should be.
You see, he didn't get elected mayor of San Antonio by luck, right, Johnson? Very good answer, by the way. Okay, we have a couple of questions that are, even by City Club standards, are real sandbags and outside the purview of our speaker. That South Suburban experience comes through. You notice that. Okay, here we go. Ron, I can't pronounce your last name, sir. G-R-A-I-S?
Grace.
Wow. G-R-A-I-S, Grace. Excellent. Okay, from Thresholds. Please speak about HUD's role in producing more permanent supportive housing, breaking down the, I can't read that word. Silos between health care and housing.
Oh, yeah.
Good
thank
question.
you very much for the question. So one of the things that we have found, we think needs even more study, but the evidence out there is fairly compelling with what we have, is that housing and healthcare go hand in hand in terms of both the needs of individuals and also reducing, having good housing, permanent supportive housing, reduces the healthcare costs that we incur as taxpayers, because especially elderly and disabled folks who have permanent supportive housing, they're less likely to end up with an emergency room visit, more likely to engage in preventative care, more likely to stay out of long-term nursing care facilities and expensive long-term care facilities. So we have something called our Project 811 Rental Assistance Program. In fact, last week we just announced $150 million of additional investment. And this one is for 25 different communities to be able to create more permanent supportive housing for folks with disabilities, so that we can see both a great quality of life for them, but also achieve those cost savings. This program rewards communities that work with their state Medicaid agencies, for instance, to look at how they can reduce those healthcare costs. And in the fiscal year 2016 budget, the president has requested funding for an additional 700 permanent supportive housing units under Section 811. So I'm excited about it.
How about a big round of applause for our speaker? Well done. Thank you very much. Oh, we got party here. Party here.